Going through a little presentation on kind of 10 things I wish I knew before we started. So we've been building generative AI solutions for customers for the last year or so. So a little bit different. Instead of forcing Copilot demos down your throat, hopefully I'll give you some insights into some of the complexities that we've faced and how you might want to help them. We're Ascent. We operate out of the London market, and we work in Germany as well, out of Munich. And we do kind of three things really well. So data and analytics, from Power BIs to Fabrics to Databricks and Synapses, and all the process and data science that goes into really producing strong analytics for our customers, to generative AI, which we'll come on to a bit more. Digital app innovation, it's Microsoft's fancy way of saying software development, and then cloud infrastructure, kind of landing zones, lift and shift, all the kind of standard operational elements, the platform pieces that you need to put in place to have a really strong cloud foundation. Like I said, we're out of UK and Munich, but then we've got delivery centers all nearshore within Europe, in Portugal, Malta, and Bulgaria. So, just in terms of kind of positioning for this talk, you kind of get chat.openai.com and Bing Chat Enterprise, kind of, very general purpose, very easy to get going with. You just log in, sign in, and start asking questions. And you kind of head up to Copilot in the middle, and then Copilot Studio, and then kind of purpose-built generative AI solutions where it's not necessarily something that's embedded in a chatbot. It might be a data pipeline, it might be OCR, it might be using generative AI in other ways, sentiment analysis. Kind of when it starts to get specialized, then customers tend to move away from the Copilots, past their limitations, and then kind of head towards us and help them with sort of custom solutions. And we've run about 14 different generative AI workshops throughout the last sort of 6 months in collaboration with Microsoft, and kind of brought those together with kind of a design thinking ethos, so not necessarily just focusing on building the technology, but also understanding the customer's pains, problems, and the journey that goes into it. First top tip is kind of prioritize your use cases. So we deal with lots of organizations that have got lots of ideas, and they sort of say, well, we've spoken to the business, we have 30 things, what do we do about that? And both the skills and the technology is moving really, really rapidly. So just yesterday or the day before, there was an announcement of GPT 4.0, and on top of that, just the innovation keeps snowballing. So the skills are getting better. People are learning more about generative AI and being better at using it, and also the technology is moving really fast. So when it comes to choosing use cases and prioritizing ideas, you kind of want to start with the kind of low risk, low complexity, and not necessarily the ones, you might have this idea that's going to be a game changer and it's going to solve world peace and world hunger, but it might be really complex. Those ones will get easier over time. So pick something to start on that's kind of got a reasonable level of complexity, a reasonable level of reward, but a lower level of complexity. So how do you do that? Part of these workshops I mentioned is we go through the organizations, and sort of down the list we kind of figure out what are the important things to them from an AI perspective. Where do they think AI can help their business? And for the financial organizations, sometimes that's around numbers. If it's a sort of a professional services organization, maybe that's around documents and PDFs and scanning and OCR and that type of thing. But you look across the different departments and you kind of come up with all these little use cases and ideas, and at that stage there's still just kind of ideas and you need to elaborate them a bit further. So we kind of follow this sort of template loosely, which really goes through kind of defining the different things that you want to think about. Kind of what's the value statement, like why do you want to do this use case, what do we think that will change for the business, and then look at the return of investment, and often people just look at the financial side and say, well, if we do some numbers, well, not sure if it stacks up, but there's experiential and the internal employee value that needs to be measured as well. So customer effort score, customer satisfaction, NPS, all those are important factors. So if there's something quite menial that's going to have sort of a marginal return on investment financially, it might make your staff a lot happier as well. So kind of look at it from both of those perspectives. Look at the supporting data. So where an organization is information that's going to help this sort of large language model do its job, and then kind of risks and mitigations. Is it sensitive data? Is it PII? Is it something that's public facing? So all of those kind of change the dynamic a bit. But if you capture all of this stuff, you kind of come up with a reward, a risk, and a complexity score, and it kind of goes back into that matrix at the beginning, and you can start to prioritize. So if you're spinning your wheels around the organization trying to figure out where generative AI fits in, well, it's a good place to start. Also, in terms of prompts, sort of ambiguity and kind of the lack of knowledge of the generative AI models inside into your organization are kind of the three biggest challenges. So, drawing a picture of a bat, you don't know which one you're going to get. You ask it about what happened yesterday, the actual large language model doesn't really know that. It was trained 6 months, a year, 2 years ago, depending on the model you're using, and then it doesn't know what sits behind your corporate firewall. And I'll go through this, it's only got 20 minutes, so I'll go through quite a high level, and if you want to come talk, I'll talk for hours down at the stand, 20 CD on the ground floor. But effectively, you've got your user, the question or the prompt coming in, you've got your application, that might be an API or a chatbot or a data pipeline, and then you kind of got these three tools. You've got this knowledge base idea, which is Azure AI Search, which is called retrieval augmented grounding. It's about getting all your data into a knowledge base, into the right format, so you can search over it, bring the most relevant details out of that search, and then push it into the language model for it to process further. Function calls, which are similar but different. So whereas the knowledge base, you bring all your data and you put it into a new data store, function calls is where you go out from your large language model to and get some information from an API or a service. So a good example is you ask the generative AI, what's the weather tomorrow? Well, it detects that you're looking for weather information, makes a call out to an API, gets the weather back, and then kind of presents it to you. And the last one is kind of prompting, and a lot of the examples you see, particularly in demos and that, you get these very simplistic prompts like summarize this document or do this one thing. But there's several different ways to think of it from a prompting perspective. There's the actual question that was asked. There's the completion, which is you can give an example of how you want it to respond. So if you want JSON, or if you want a table, or if you want text art, or however you want to get that data back, you can specify that. You can also ask it to rephrase the question. So if someone's asked the question in a roundabout way, you can either go back to the user and ask them for more information, or you can clarify that using the generative AI model itself. And then things like the personality, you can tell the generative AI to be rude, to be funny, add a joke. You've got all these options around it. So don't think of these prompts as just like the prompt is a question and then the generative AI comes and gives you the answer. You can actually provide half a page, 2 pages, 3 pages of details to go along with that. And kind of tip number 3, these prompts are like recipes really. And if you take a photo, if you remember some of them, if you go and research on the internet, you'll find sort of several of these different kind of patterns. But it's all kind of human behavioral type of patterns being applied to the generative AI that help you to elicit a certain response and get users to interact in a certain way. Also, I see you guys taking photos. Feel free. If you want the deck at the end, I've got my LinkedIn as well. I'll send you a PDF as well, no problem. So a good example of one of these is this ADA, attention, interest, desire, and action. And if you stop thinking of prompting as a single question, and you think of it as a flow, as a conversation, then you can start to kind of build these patterns in. So, capture someone's attention with a specific question or statement, and like, okay, yeah, that's interesting to me, and then kind of come on in. Capture someone's attention, then look and see if you can match up with some of their interests, or to kind of build that rapport and try and get the person to respond further. Create some desire, like what would they maybe need from us? What would they like? Kind of based on the information they've given us so far, what's the next best question I can pose to kind of get them to engage with me more? And then the last one is kind of a call to action, which is like, well, if you do something now, we can give you something. So if you sign up early, you get a bit of a discount. So it's kind of all of those little prompt recipes have got these different ways of kind of engaging depending on what you want to achieve through your business. There are a million different use cases are like trading cards. There's just hundreds of different uses. These are just some of the ones that we've come up with. And my latest favorite, I've got 2 favorites at the moment. The one is OCR, so if you've got an invoice and you give it to GPT-4 with vision, and you say, on this invoice, give me the supplier, the invoice lines, the total, boom, 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 boom. Off it goes and comes back with a really good example. I've got one a little bit further. The second one is search, which is the one that I'm not scared of generative AI, so I don't think it's going to take over the world, but I do think things like generative AI search are really going to revolutionize the way you interact with computers, and also provide a lot of risk. So organizations, there's a development site where you can go and get code samples called Stack Overflow, which I've been a part of for the last 12, 15 years, whatever it is. Their traffic has dropped by 80%. So people are going straight to the generative AI for the answer. And a lot of these things, what's the weather, what's the news headlines, you're going to generative AI, you're asking it a question. Behind the scenes, it might be going to a website and getting an answer back. But all those websites in the back, they're just seeing traffic from chat.openai.com or Bing Chat Enterprise. So less people are actually going to visit each of those sites to actually get the response or the results and the answers. So that's the one that's really interesting, because it's like if you walk down the high street in London or Munich or somewhere, it's all the big shops, the big stores have kind of taken over, and the little home stores, the ones that are really interesting and quirky, seem to get hoovered up and disappear, and the same is kind of happening on the internet. Number 5 is kind of when you get into building large language models and developing with them. There's not just OpenAI, there's 3, 5, 4, 4 with Vision, Llama, Pi, Wizard, and all of these have got kind of different use cases. So you're going to get the less capable and older ones, which people think, why are we using that? That doesn't really make sense. But they're much cheaper, and often they perform faster. So you kind of need to balance the freshness of the data in the model. The older ones have been trained on older data with these other things to make sure that you optimize your solution to get to the right place. The next one is people always seem to be a bit concerned about responsible AI. So, are we being ethical? What are the risks? How do we manage this? And is it going to be malicious? And Microsoft's done a really good job of laying out this responsible AI framework, and it's got kind of these principles, 6 principles, and then goals and requirements. So if you take a principle like accountability, one of the things that is stated in the goals is that you need human oversight and control over the generative AI, and then the requirement should be go and identify the stakeholders that are responsible for that AI. So, kind of if you go through each of these in this responsible AI standard, underneath each of those there's about 3 or 4 goals, and there's about 3 or 4 requirements underneath each of those. Probably a little bit more than that, but it's a really good framework, and if you work through all of that, you can see how you can shape that AI, plus create feedback loops and feedback mechanisms, and build that into your solution so that you're comfortable that you're giving a responsible solution to your end users or customers. Number 7 is that there's about 1 million different ways that you can do generative AI from a technology perspective. And there's kind of 3 areas that we tend to focus in. One is a place to land, we call it application landing zone, but it's probably more a place to host and run containers. So if you've heard of Kubernetes or something like that, there's a whole host of things that can complement your generative AI, from building API interfaces to building user interfaces to hosting large language models. So if you're not using the OpenAI ones, using something like Llama 3 from Facebook, you need to host that somewhere. You host it in a container, and then if you want to start authoring prompt flows, so if we go back to those chain of thought prompt techniques, you can actually author those in something called prompt flow, and then you can deploy it into a containerized environment as well. So that works really well and super helpful for generative AI. The second thing that really helps a lot, and you don't need all of these, you just need a few of them to kind of get going, is getting your data in the right shape for generative AI. So it's a bit of the old adage of garbage in, garbage out. If you've got poor, incomplete, inconsistent, inaccurate data, by the time you've got the generative AI to reason over that and put its spin on it, it degrades even further. So if you've got really high quality data and a really poor or bad set of implemented prompts, then you're still going to get bad results. So you need good prompts and you need good data. and then you need a tool like a Fabric or a Databricks or a Synapse, and that search index, that knowledge base, so prepare the data, clean, align, structure it. Generative AI likes short, concise data. That's what it works best with. Each of those models have got something called a context window, and it ranges from, I guess in layman's terms, from a couple of pages of data you feed in to maybe like 20, 30 pages, and that's it. So you need to put the right information into that to get the maximum value out. And there's some services that go along very well with it. And then in terms of the actual AI services itself, you've got Microsoft's implementation of OpenAI, so that language model works really well. Plus they've just released AI Studio a few months ago, which gives you an environment for being able to author and create prompt flows and workflows, and have this kind of playpen in order to be able to build your generative AI. We have a reference architecture that takes a bunch of that stuff and pulls it together and makes it easy to deploy, so that our customers can get going quickly, and we can focus on actually building out something of value with them, as opposed to scratching our heads around the architecture. So we kind of got this rapid deployment that really helps get projects off to a quick start. Generative AI is also surprisingly good at data engineering. So we do a lot of projects for customers where we have to process data through a set of steps, and generative AI is kind of a game changer. And if you look at sort of that example of text extraction, it's traditionally to go and extract that, to try and find where an address is in a piece of text, figure out where the start of that address is, the end of that address is, what's the country and the postcode and the details, and then go and map it to a schema. If you were starting from scratch and hadn't done it before, that's like a week's worth of work. With generative AI, it's kind of one prompt to extract that. Looking up data from the internet, company names from URLs, very easy. Industry classification, again, trying to have a set of company names and classify them around the GICS industry classification, which is kind of the international standard. Would take sort of months of work and NLP processing and all sorts of interesting stuff just to try and get that result. Again, the generative AI, within seconds you can get results, and you can embed those into your data pipelines. And great for data cleaning. I didn't put any real phone numbers in here just in case it was one of yours. So it's really good at kind of sorting out rubbish data and kind of normalizing it, as opposed to writing there'd probably be a different rule for each of those lines. A couple of days worth of work or a day's worth of work into a couple of seconds. So it's super productive and helpful. I spoke a little bit earlier around image recognition. So this is like a really poor quality, really old invoice, and with about 80% accuracy, 90% accuracy, it can pull out all the invoice metadata and the line items. If you've got a well-formatted or a well-printed, like modern invoice that's been scanned, accuracy is right up 99-100%, so super useful. And traditional OCR, it would draw little squares on the screen and say, okay, well, there's some information here, some information there. The generative AI is just able to reason over that and just pull it out, so it makes it a lot quicker. Kind of top tip number 10, and sort of right on the money on 20 minutes, is these are the kind of the 4 things that we really look to ensure with our customers before we start off. One is tangible value. Make sure you've got a use case where there's a return, and as I said before, not necessarily a commercial return, but it might be an experiential one as well. Make sure that your data is in good shape and ready to be used by the generative AI. A trusted OpenAI service, so what's really nice, we're an Azure partner and a lot of our customers are all on Azure. And what's good about the Microsoft service is the same billing, same logging, same auditing, same networking, same security model. All of that just applies out of the box and stops you having to integrate with another vendor. And then kind of a digital solution, whether it's an API or a user interface or a data pipeline or a plugin, etc. And it's quite interesting to do these generative AI projects for us, because starts off with a more traditional data science approach, like a lot of experimentation, try, fail. And then as you kind of start to get results, so if you take sort of 5 or 6 use cases, Of those, you might find 2 are good candidates. Of those, you might pick 1 to proceed with. And that experimentation part gets you through there, and then into kind of software development where you layer on dev, test, prod, additional security, testing, rigor, responsible AI before you start getting your model deployed. And because these models are getting released and versioned and improving all the time, there's quite a drive towards doing some sort of LLM ops type process where you continue, once a month you evaluate the model, run through some criteria to make sure that it's still performing, and then look at upgrading to the next one. They haven't kicked me off yet, so I do have another 2, which I'll zip through. One is not everything is generative AI, so a lot of conversations we have is that the GenAI will solve this. Sometimes it's a bit of data science, sometimes it's search, sometimes it's data analytics that they're after. So whilst GenAI is the talk of the town, there's a great bunch of other tools, fabrics and Databricks and that type of thing that you can solve some of these problems with. And the last one I have is kind of human in the loop and human out the loop, and this is one we see quite often where people say, well, what if you replace 100 people with this AI? And that's a really hard thing to do, because there's a lot of organizational change, plus there's a lot of risk in terms of the way the AI behaves and responds, and you effectively, saying we're going to flush out some of the expertise out of our business. So we much prefer starting with these kind of human in the loop scenarios where you've got an AI that's assisting a person to do their job faster. And a good example, I was working with a call center, and we're using the AI to shift everything left, so to kind of get first line support to do 25% more using the AI, second line 25% more, and that means the third line support is normally the experts in the business and never have time for anything. It relieves a lot of pressure off of them. And one of the questions I asked, I said, well, how does that impact your staff? And they said, well, nobody really wants to work in first line or second line. We've got about 15% attrition, so if we just wait 12 months, the people in the organization will change. But I'm a bit over time. I've stolen a couple of extra points there. If you want to speak, talk about generative AI, kind of the stuff that sits below the line, so everyone just sees the prompt. There's a lot more to it. Feel free to pop by the booth. I'll be there the whole afternoon, most of tomorrow. Very happy to speak, share the slides as well. So that QR will get you to my LinkedIn. Thank you, everyone.